If you're someone who cares about your rights, your safety, or just understanding what's happening in America right now, then you need to pay attention to what I'm about to tell you. Because something massive just happened at the Supreme Court. And it's going to change the way millions of Americans think about gun ownership, self-defense, and personal freedom. This isn't just another legal update. This is a shift that affects over 100 million people across the country. And whether you own a gun or not, whether you're pro-Second Amendment or not, this decision impacts you. So let's break it down in the simplest way possible so you can understand exactly what happened, why it matters, and what it means for your state. In June 2022, the Supreme Court made a landmark decision in a case called New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruen. Now, I know legal names sound boring, but trust me, this case is anything but boring. The court voted 6-3, with Justice Clarence Thomas writing the majority opinion. And what they said was this: law-abiding citizens have the constitutional right to carry a gun in public for self-defense. That might sound obvious to some of you, but for decades, many states didn't see it that way. They made it extremely difficult, sometimes nearly impossible, for regular people to get a permit to carry a gun outside their home. And the Supreme Court just said, that's unconstitutional. That's a violation of the Second Amendment. And that changes everything. So what was the system before this decision? It was called a may issue system. And here's how it worked. In states like New York, California, New Jersey, and others, you couldn't just apply for a gun permit and expect to get one. Even if you had a clean background, even if you completed all the training, the state could still deny you. Why? Because they wanted you to prove that you had a special need. They wanted you to show that your life was in danger, that you were being threatened, that you were somehow more at risk than the average person. And if the state didn't think your reason was good enough, they could just say no. Imagine that. You're a law-abiding citizen. You've never committed a crime. You've done everything right. But some government official gets to decide whether your fear is valid or not. That's what millions of Americans were living under. And the Supreme Court said, that's not how the Constitution works. Now, the system is called shall issue. And the difference is huge. Under shall issue, if you meet the basic requirements, the state has to give you a permit. They can't just deny you because they feel like it. If your background check is clear, if you've completed the required training, if you're a responsible adult, then the state shall issue you a permit. It's not optional anymore. It's mandatory. And that's a game changer for states that have been making it nearly impossible for people to exercise their Second Amendment rights. Now let's talk about which states were hit the hardest by this ruling. We're talking about New York, California, New Jersey, Maryland, Massachusetts, and Hawaii. These were the states that had the strictest may issue laws. And combined, we're talking about over 100 million Americans who were living under these restrictive systems. That's a massive portion of the population. And now, all of those states have had to change their laws. Some of them are doing it willingly. Others are fighting it tooth and nail, trying to come up with new ways to make it difficult. But the bottom line is this: the Supreme Court has spoken, and the old system is dead. One of the biggest takeaways from this case is that self-defense is now considered a good enough reason all by itself. You don't have to prove that someone is actively trying to hurt you. You don't have to show police reports or restraining orders. You don't have to be a celebrity or a politician or someone who's been threatened. The Second Amendment itself is the reason. The right to defend yourself is built into the Constitution, and that's all the justification you need. The state can't tell you that your life isn't dangerous enough. They can't tell you that you're not a special target, because the right to self-defense belongs to everyone, not just people the government thinks are important. If you're finding this helpful so far, do me a favor and hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more content like this. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe now so you don't miss the next video where we dive even deeper into your rights and what's happening in this country. And share this with someone who needs to hear it, because not enough people know about this decision and how it affects them. But here's where things get even more interesting. The Supreme Court didn't just rule on this one case and move on. They actually changed the way courts are supposed to judge gun laws from now on. Before this decision, courts used something called intermediate scrutiny. That's a legal term. But basically it meant that the government could pass gun laws as long as they had a decent reason and the law seemed somewhat reasonable. And under that system, the government won most of the time. But the Supreme Court said, we're not doing that anymore. Now, gun laws have to pass what's called the history and tradition test. And this is huge. What it means is that if a certain type of gun restriction didn't exist back in the founding era, back when the Constitution was written, then it's probably not constitutional today. If there's no historical precedent for it, the law is weak. And that opens the door for all kinds of gun laws to be challenged. We're already seeing it happen. Laws about magazine capacity, laws about certain types of firearms, laws about where you can carry. All of these are now being challenged in court using this new test. Now let me clear up some major misconceptions, because there's a lot of confusion out there. First, some people think this decision means permits are completely gone. That's not true. States can still require permits. They can still do background checks. They can still require training. What they can't do is deny you a permit just because they don't think you have a good enough reason. Second, some people think this means gun-free zones are gone. Also not true. There are still certain places called sensitive places where guns can be restricted. Things like schools, government buildings, courthouses, these can still be gun-free. The question now is how far states can stretch that definition. And third, some people think this only applies to concealed carry. Wrong again. The logic of this decision applies to all forms of public carry, whether it's concealed or open. The core principle is the same. Law-abiding citizens have the right to carry a gun in public. But, of course, not everyone is happy about this decision. And some states are trying to find new ways to make it harder to get a permit, even under the new rules. How are they doing that? By creating more and more sensitive places where guns aren't allowed, by adding extra requirements like social media checks, where they go through your online history to see if you've posted anything they don't like, by requiring multiple interviews, making you justify yourself over and over again. These tactics are being challenged in court right now, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. But the bottom line is, the Supreme Court has set a very clear standard, and states that try to get around it are going to have a tough time. Let me give you some real-life examples of how this decision has changed things. In New York City, there was a business owner who applied for a carry permit years ago and was denied. Why? Because the city didn't think he had a good enough reason. He ran a business in a rough neighborhood, he carried cash, he worked late hours, but that still wasn't enough for them. After the Bruen decision, he applied again, and this time he was approved. In California, there was a woman who had been threatened by an ex-partner. She had filed police reports. She had a restraining order. But the county still denied her permit because they said her threat wasn't serious enough. After Bruen, she reapplied and got her permit within weeks. In New Jersey, a man who lived in a high-crime area was told he didn't meet the justifiable need standard. After the ruling, that standard was thrown out, and he got his permit. These are real people whose lives have been directly affected by this decision. Now, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. This isn't the first time the Supreme Court has ruled on the Second Amendment in recent years. In 2008, there was a case called District of Columbia versus Heller. That case said you have the right to keep a gun in your home for self-defense. In 2010, there was McDonald versus Chicago, which said that right applies to state and local governments, not just the federal government. And now, in 2022, we have Bruen, which says you have the right to carry that gun outside your home. Do you see the pattern? The Second Amendment is expanding. The courts are recognizing more and more that this right is real, it's protected, and it applies to everyday Americans. Before we keep going, if you're getting value from this breakdown, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends and family. A lot of people don't understand what's happening with their rights, and videos like this help spread the word. So take 2 seconds and hit those buttons. It makes a huge difference. So what are the 3 biggest takeaways from all of this? First, May issue permit systems are dead. States can't just deny you a permit because they don't think your reason is good enough. If you're a law-abiding citizen, you have the right to carry. Second, gun laws are now going to be judged based on history and tradition. If a law doesn't have roots in the founding era, it's going to be a lot harder to defend in court. And third, the Second Amendment is in its strongest phase in modern history. The courts are finally taking it seriously, and that's going to have ripple effects for years to come. But let's be real for a second. This decision doesn't mean everything is perfect. There are still battles being fought. There are still states trying to resist. There are still people who think this ruling goes too far, and others who think it doesn't go far enough. And that's okay. That's how democracy works. But what's important is that you understand what's happening. You need to know your rights. You need to know what the law says. And you need to be informed so you can make smart decisions for yourself and your family. And here's the thing that a lot of people miss. This isn't just about guns. This is about the Constitution. This is about whether the rights written in that document actually mean something, or whether the government can just ignore them whenever it's convenient. If the Second Amendment can be watered down, restricted, and reinterpreted to the point where it barely exists, then what's stopping the same thing from happening to the First Amendment, or the Fourth, or any other right you care about? That's why cases like this matter, because they set the precedent for how we treat all of our rights. I also want to address something that comes up a lot in these conversations. Some people say, well, if more people are carrying guns, won't that make things more dangerous? And look, that's a fair question, but the data tells a different story. States that have had shall-issue laws for years, states like Texas, Florida, Arizona, they haven't seen massive increases in crime because of it. In fact, many of them have seen crime go down. Because when criminals don't know who's armed and who isn't, they think twice before attacking someone. There's a reason why mass shootings almost never happen at gun ranges or police stations. It's because those places have armed people and criminals know it. Now, I'm not saying more guns automatically equals less crime. That's too simple. But I am saying the fear that more legal gun owners will lead to chaos just is not supported by the evidence. Another thing to think about is this. The people who are most affected by strict gun laws are often the people who need protection the most. Single mothers in dangerous neighborhoods, small business owners in high crime areas, people who work late shifts and have to walk to their cars in the dark. These are the people who are being denied permits under the old system. Meanwhile, wealthy people, politicians, celebrities, they could afford private security or had connections to get permits approved. So really, the old system wasn't about safety. It was about control. It was about deciding who gets to exercise their rights and who doesn't. And the Supreme Court said, that's not acceptable. If you're still watching, thank you. Seriously. This is important stuff, and I appreciate you taking the time to educate yourself. If you found this video useful, go ahead and like it, subscribe to the channel, and share it with anyone who might benefit. The algorithm loves engagement, and it helps me reach more people who need to hear this message. Now, what does the future look like? Well, we're going to see more legal challenges, more lawsuits, more cases going to the Supreme Court. Because this ruling opened the door, but it didn't answer every question. What counts as a sensitive place? Can states require expensive training courses? Can't they add fees that make permits unaffordable? These are all questions that are going to be decided in the courts over the next few years. And depending on how those cases go, we could see even more expansion of Second Amendment rights, or we could see states trying to claw back some control. One thing's for sure, though. The conversation around guns in America has changed. And whether you love guns or hate them, whether you think this ruling is a victory or a disaster, you can't ignore it. It's real. It's happening. And it's going to shape the legal landscape for generations. So here's my challenge to you. Don't just take my word for it. Go read the Bruen decision yourself. Look up what's happening in your state. Talk to people who disagree with you. Educate yourself. Because the more you know, the better decisions you can make. And in a country where your rights are constantly being debated, challenged, and redefined, knowledge is power. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And I'll see you in the next one.